Hi there, Prairie Plant Girl here. Today I'm over where I have some of my potted potatoes. Hi Buster. My pots of potatoes popped back at the back of my yard here, and I have enough potatoes to do up 2 more pots. So that'll be the last of my potatoes to get planted this year, unless I come across something in a store somewhere that I get really excited about. I guess I messed up on my potato order this year and I never actually completed it. I contacted the company and I don't know, they don't have the order, so I'm not sure what happened there, but I do know I ordered it like in the middle of the night, so I'm sure I made a mistake somewhere in that. But I had enough potatoes left over from my own stock to actually grow quite a few, and both my kids will be going away to university this year. I'm sure I'll get enough potatoes for my husband and I for the year, and the odd, family supper when the kids are home. But I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 pots of potatoes planted right now. I have a 4x8 bed of potatoes planted, and then I'm going to do 2 more pots this morning. So most of these are Norland. I have a couple of Green Mountain, some Amarosa, I think Sangre. No, maybe not. Looks like no Sangre, and some French fingerling. The seed potatoes that I have were in this bag because some of my potatoes got mixed together in storage this year. And, once they become kind of older and shriveled up, sometimes it's hard to identify what potato is what. And these are either Norland or Rhode Easterling. I've already planted a few of these up in some fabric pots. So you can see the fabric pots behind me, that's what's in them, is this either Norland or Rhode Easterling. I'm just not sure which. And I picked out, so I'm sure it's 2 different varieties because some had very red sprouts on them, and some were very yellow. Otherwise, the potato itself looks the same. And I honestly can't remember it. I'm thinking these are red Norland because of the red sprouts, but Rhode Easterling was new to me last year, so I'm not sure what it looked like. But that was my closest guess as to what the 2 possibilities were of these potatoes. So I have 6, 7 really tiny little seed potatoes here, but and their sprouts are getting quite large, but they'll be all right. So I'm going to get them planted up, and I thought some of you might like to see how I do this in my bags. And I'm actually going to do something just a little bit different this year to see if it helps my fabric bags to hold on to some moisture. I am planting them in these fabric grow bags. These are grow bags that I made myself. They're a little dirty right now. If you want to see how I've made these, I'll put a link. It's a few years old, but they weren't too difficult to make. I don't know the exact type of fabric I made them out of, as it was just something that was packed around appliances when we received it. But I think any kind of good, heavy felt is what you would be looking for something like this. That's what most of these grow bags are made out of, is like a heavy felt. So if you decide to make them yourself, that's what I would look for. I also have some that are made out of a heavy duty landscape fabric. Right here. This is actually made out of landscape fabric. You can see the striping on the outside, and it's like a felted landscape fabric. These work really well. And I didn't put handles on these because I really don't carry them around when they're full. So that's what I'll be planting into, and with a fabric grow bag I find that they dry out a lot faster. That's part of the beauty of a fabric grow bag, is that the air really moves around through the fabric, gets to the roots. There's root pruning, roots aren't just circling around. I'm not sure any of those things are really exceptionally spectacular for growing potatoes in, but that's what I grow my potatoes in. So when you have something like that and you're trying to grow potatoes, which do like some moisture, they certainly don't want to be damp. They want to be able to, have good draining soil, but they do need moisture to grow. A heavier soil is better. So you don't want to just pick up like a potting mix or something. I've done that in the past. Even just like something that's heavy in peat moss, which normally in my beds or my plastic pots, I'll often just mix some steer manure and peat moss together, heavy on the peat moss. And that's just too light of a mix for these bags. So this year I've picked up This is a compost. It's composted manure. This is a combination of sheep and cow manure, I believe. It does have some peat moss in it, but it also has aged bark. And the bark and the manure together should really help to hold some moisture in here. And then the peat moss should give it that little bit of airiness and drainage that the potatoes will need so they don't just like rot in the moisture. So I'm gonna open one of these bags up. I have 2 here. I think I'll probably only need 1 for today. Just dump it in here to make it easier for me. And then we'll get to the next step. So I have this nice composted manure and like bark fines and a little bit of peat moss. This mix here, it's a good heavy mix. It's not going to drain too quickly, but it definitely will be able to drain so that the potatoes aren't staying locked in moisture and rotting. So that's what I'm looking for with this type of pot. If I was using just a plastic pot or just in ground, then I find that peat moss and just a little bit of like steer manure or something, or even I've used old potting mix, from some of my flour containers or whatnot. Just reuse that mix that's maybe a little bit spent and just added some bone meal or something into it. And that works well as well. It's a good way to reuse it if you have extra things like that around, or just your own compost. So those are all good things that you can use. Potatoes aren't super fussy about their soil. They just want something that's gonna, be able to hold a little bit of moisture, but also drain and not stay waterlogged. They want like a neutral to a slightly acidic soil, and they want some good nutrients. So anything that's a good fertile soil, like this mix, will have lots of nutrients in it, or just add an all-purpose fertilizer, or I like to use bone meal. All of that will work well to grow your potatoes in. So I have this good heavy mix, and then I'm going to add one of these. This is actually like a drip catcher to put underneath your potted plants. And I've used in the past, I've tried putting it underneath, to hold some moisture. But I mean, the pots, I don't know how well you can see there, they just kind of sit on, they don't totally fall right in there. And if they do get right to the bottom, then they're squishing the sides and breaking these little plastic trays. And so what I'm trying this year as an experiment is putting them on the inside. And it doesn't completely fit the whole bottom of the pot. I don't know how well you can see that there, but it fills most of it. And that should help to just hold a little bit of moisture down at the root zone without drowning the potatoes, and just giving them a little bit longer with the moisture before they use it up there. So I hope that makes sense, but just trying to contain a little bit of the moisture. Because of the fabric pot, a lot of it will run out the sides or right straight through the bottom, and we don't have a lot of like long steady rains here. So when we get rain, it's just dumping a whole bunch quite often. If we get it in the summer, it'll just dump a bunch in a little bit of time. So it just pretty much drains through really quickly. Or if I'm watering, I'm not coming back, slowly dribbling a little bit in over and over. I do have a bit of a drip line I'm going to try and set up to these, but again, I'm not going to have it running several times a day, just a little bit, because it's connected in with my garden. So I need it to run for a long time to thoroughly soak the ground to my garden. Because that's what's better for most plants, is a long run, good thorough soaking less often. But anyway, so what I'm going to do with these now is I'm going to fill this pot probably about quarter to a third of the way full with this good mix, and then we'll get the potatoes planted. Because this is made with the composted manure, and it seems to be a good heavy, rich fertilizer, good rich soil mix, I won't be adding any nutrients to it at this point, because these are being grown in pots, so they won't be able to get extra nutrients, and this will get used up. So after they sprouted, I'll probably come along with just a general all-purpose fertilizer. I like this one, but you could grab anything that that you like. Bone meal also works great. I just haven't found it at the store I usually buy it at. I don't know why, but if I do get my hands on bone meal, then I'll probably just come through and sprinkle some bone meal, work it into the top layer. But if not the bone meal, then that other mix will be just fine. And since I have seven potatoes, I'm going to be putting 3 in one bag and 4 in the other. So I'm going to just kind of pick through and try and get the 4 kind of larger potatoes and put those in one pot. So I'll put these in one and the 4 smaller in the other. And that's what I'll do. So I'm just going to take them, and you see like the sprouts are basically pointing up. So I'm just going to plant it down. Now some people say like there's this one end here that's probably where the roots came out of, and you should look for that, put it down or whatever. But really, you could just set them whatever way you want. I'm just going to put them this way because then I have less chance of snapping the sprouts off, to just set them that way. I mean, this one I could put completely sideways. I could put it up. I could put it upside down. Those sprouts will eventually find their way up, but getting them oriented the right way to begin with should speed up the process. So that's all I'm going to do, is just take them and just set them down on the ground with the sprouts pointing generally in the upright position. And I'm just going to space them out so they're not completely at the edge of the pot. They're just spaced nicely around kind of the middle rung. And then I'm just going to cover them over with enough mix to cover those sprouts. So that's all I'm going to do other than water these for now. I will put a tag in here so I know what they are. As much as I know what they are, I did say I'm not exactly sure, but I'm going to put Norland or Road Earsterling. And if any of you know, just from looking at those seed potatoes, maybe you're more familiar with the Road Earsterling, but I do think they're the Norland. And this one was 3 potatoes, so I'll write that on here. So we'll know this is the one that I planted up for you, and that had the 3 potatoes in it. I'll just stick this off to the side where it's not hitting those seed potatoes. And as the sprouts grow, I will continue to top this up till it gets close to the top of the bag here. I will use a combination of this with some thicker, I have some in some of these pots here, like a mulch. So this is just like what I've kind of sifted off some of my compost, and I just have it saved in bags, some of it, and I'll just use this almost like a mulch and a top dressing as this builds up. So that'll just help to feed the potatoes as well, because it's still going to be full of good nutrients, and it'll help to kind of mulch the top so that they're not drying out too quickly. You could also use leaves. Just be careful they don't get too compacted, so the sprouts can't come through the soil, or dried grass clippings works well for mulching your potatoes. Like I said, potatoes will grow in almost anything. So now I have the other bag to do, so I'm just going to get that done quick. So potatoes want a good full sun location, so at least 6 to 8 hours of sun a day to grow good and strong potatoes. Now, I have grown them in shadier places in the past. They just won't grow as vigorously. But if that's the only space you have is tucked in like between a fence and a garage, as long as they're getting, you know, around 6 hours of sun a day, I'd say, then you're probably okay with that. That's the beauty of growing them in the pots too, is when they're smaller and the light maybe isn't hitting them as well in a more enclosed space, maybe you can have them out somewhere a bit sunnier, and then when they get taller and you have a big plant above them, maybe they'll be reaching light in another area. Maybe you could go and pop them back into a corner somewhere and they'll grow better. So they should, that's one of the benefits of growing in pots that way, is you can move them around. Or if you normally have them out on your patio, because that's where it gets the best sun, but you have company coming over, you just pick up your pots and move them for the afternoon, right? So here's the 4 smaller potatoes. So like I said, these are just potatoes that I harvested last year, and they were just sitting with all the other potatoes that I was actually eating throughout the winter. And I missed a few. I always try and pull a few smaller potatoes out when I do the harvest to save for planting. But I always seem to miss a few, or I think I'll get to them and eat them as fresh, somewhat fresh baby potatoes early on in the, in the late summer, early fall. And then there's always a few that seem to get left behind. So that's just why I had these little potatoes like this, and they start to sprout, and I mean, eventually you just don't want to eat this, but it's still good for planting. So I just pulled them to the side at some point in the winter, and they've just been sitting and waiting for me to plant them. Okay, so those are all covered. There's no more sprouts showing anywhere. So I'll label this one as having 4 in it. These are just homemade garden stakes that I've made using chalkboard paint. And it's just a chalkboard marker. And this particular one is just a 5-gallon stir stick for paint, like a 5-gallon paint jug. But I've also just used my table saw to cut down pieces of wood to a nice size as well. So one side's smoother. So really cheap and easy to make. If you need some stakes that you want to be able to mark. And I used these last year, and I found the markings stayed on really well. And then you just come with a damp cloth at the end of the season and you can wipe it off to reuse for the next year. So I made, I don't know, maybe about 10 last year, and I've made, I think, over a dozen more now this year because I really liked them. So just a little side note on stakes for your plants. So I'll get this set with the rest and get some water on them, and then we just have to wait. So I'll bring you back when it's time to harvest these, maybe give you an update if I remember before then. But that's all I do to plant my potatoes in pots and fabric grow bags. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.